The throne room of Amarith Prime was made of living crystal. It grew from the floor like frozen light and reached toward the ceiling in shapes that no human eye had ever seen. The walls glowed with soft blue and purple colors. They changed slowly like breathing. This was the heart of the Velkhari Empire. This was where Queen Thessera had ruled for 3,000 years. The queen herself sat upon a throne that had grown around her over centuries. She was tall and elegant. Her body was covered in smooth plates that shone like polished metal. Her eyes were large and dark and held the wisdom of ages. 6 thin arms rested on the arms of her throne. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had watched stars die. Nothing surprised her anymore, until the day her youngest daughter disappeared. Princess Lyriel was different from her sisters. She was curious about the universe in ways that troubled the court. She asked questions that had no proper answers. She wanted to visit the edges of their empire, where strange new species were appearing. The humans, they called themselves. Small creatures with soft skin and short lives. They had only recently discovered how to travel between stars. The Velkhari considered them barely worth noticing, but Lyriel was fascinated by them. She read every report about human culture. She studied their strange languages. She begged her mother to let her join a diplomatic mission to the border regions. After many arguments, the queen finally agreed. Her daughter would travel to the outer reaches. She would observe the humans from a safe distance. She would satisfy her curiosity and return home. Lyriel never returned. 3 weeks after her departure, her ship was found drifting near the border with human space. The vessel was damaged. There were marks of weapon fire on the hull. Inside, they found dead crew members and signs of a violent struggle. Her emergency pod was missing. The Velkhari search parties looked for months. They scanned every planet and moon within 100 light-years. They sent probes into asteroid fields and gas clouds. They found nothing. No signal, no wreckage, no trace of Princess Lyriel. The court needed someone to blame, and there was an easy answer: the humans. The ship was found near human space. The humans were known to be aggressive and unpredictable. Perhaps they had captured the princess. Perhaps they wanted to use her as leverage against the Empire. Perhaps they had simply killed her for sport. Humans were like that, the advisors said. They were violent by nature. Queen Thessera listened to these accusations in silence. Her heart was breaking, but her face showed nothing. She had learned long ago to hide her feelings from the court. Emotion was weakness. A queen could not be weak. She ordered more search parties. She demanded answers from human governments. The humans denied any involvement. They seemed genuinely confused by the accusations. But this only made the Velkhari more suspicious. Of course the humans would lie. That was what primitives did. The cycles passed. 1 year became 2. 2 became 5. The search parties grew smaller. The reports came less often. Hope faded like starlight at dawn. After 15 Earth years, the Council of Elders made a formal request. It was time to declare Princess Lyriel dead. The Empire needed closure. The succession needed to be clarified. The Queen needed to move forward. Thessera agreed. What choice did she have? Her daughter was gone. No one could survive alone in space for so long. Even if Lyriel had reached a planet, she would have died long ago, alone and afraid on some barren rock, crying out for her mother. The Queen sealed her daughter's chambers herself. She walked through the rooms one final time. She touched the books that Lyriel had loved. She looked at the star maps, covered in her daughter's handwriting. She picked up a small crystal sculpture that Lyriel had made as a child. A clumsy thing, really, but the Queen had treasured it for centuries. She stood there in the darkness and finally allowed herself to weep. In public, she was stone. She delivered speeches about her daughter's memory. She accepted the condolences of other rulers. She attended the memorial ceremony, where Lyriel's name was carved into the wall of the Remembered. But in private, late at night, when no one could see, she returned to those sealed chambers. She sat in her daughter's chair. She read her daughter's journals. She looked at the stars through her daughter's window and wondered which one had taken her child. The Empire used the tragedy well. Politicians spoke of human aggression. Military leaders demanded increased patrols near the border. Some called openly for war. The humans had killed their princess, they said. The humans must pay. Thessera did not stop these voices. Perhaps she should have. But her grief had turned cold and hard inside her chest. If the humans had taken her daughter, then let them fear the consequences. Let them spend their short little lives looking over their shoulders. Let them know that the Velkhari Empire had a long memory. But she did not order war. Not yet. Some small part of her still hoped. Some stubborn flame refused to go out. Perhaps Lyriel was still alive somewhere. Perhaps she would find her way home. It was a foolish hope. Thessera knew that. Her advisors knew that. Everyone knew that. But the queen kept her daughter's chambers sealed rather than emptied. She kept the crystal sculpture on her private desk. She kept hoping in the deepest part of her heart, where no one else could see. 15 years was nothing to a Velkhari. They lived for thousands of years. They measured time in centuries, not seasons. But those 15 years without Lyriel felt longer than all the centuries before. The queen grew harder. Her judgments became more severe. Her patience wore thin. She trusted fewer and fewer people. Her other daughters worried about her. Her advisors whispered in corners. Something had broken inside the Eternal Queen. And far away, on a small blue-green world that the Velkhari had never bothered to name, Princess Lyriel was sitting down to dinner with her human family. She was laughing at a joke her husband had told. She was helping her daughter cut her food. She was alive and happy, and utterly unaware that her mother wept for her every night. The truth would come out eventually. It always does. But that is a story for another time. The attack came without warning. Princess Lyriel was standing at the observation window of her ship when the first blast hit. The vessel shook violently. Alarms screamed. Her crew scrambled to their positions, but they were diplomats, not warriors. They had never expected to fight. The attackers were Kethra raiders. Everyone in the galaxy knew about them. They were scavengers and thieves who preyed on isolated ships. They had no homeworld, no government, no laws. They killed for profit and pleasure. The battle was short and brutal. The Velkhari ship was not built for combat. The raiders tore through its defenses like paper. Lyriel watched her crew die around her. She felt plasma burns across her arms and back. She tasted blood in her mouth. But she did not die. When the raiders boarded the ship, they found it already in flames. The self-destruct system was counting down. They grabbed what valuables they could find and fled. They did not bother searching for survivors. Lyriel crawled through the burning corridors. Her body was broken. Her translator was destroyed. Her emergency beacon was shattered. But she reached the escape pod. She launched herself into the void just as her ship exploded behind her. The pod's navigation system was damaged. It could not take her home. It could only find the nearest inhabited world and crash there. So that is what it did. She crashed in a forest on a planet called New Meridian. It was a human colony on the edge of explored space, rough and simple and very far from anywhere important. The pod burned through the atmosphere and smashed into the ground, leaving a trail of fire across the sky. A man named Marcus Vance saw the crash from his cabin. He was a botanist who studied alien plants. He lived alone with his young son Eli after his wife died of sickness 2 years before. They had a small house on the edge of the colony, surrounded by wilderness and strange flowers. Marcus ran toward the crash site. He did not know what he would find. He did not care. Someone might need help. That was reason enough to go. He found Lyriel in the wreckage. She was barely alive. Her body was covered in burns and wounds. She looked like nothing he had ever seen before. Her smooth plated skin, her large dark eyes, her 6 arms hanging limp at her sides. He did not know what species she was. He did not know if she was dangerous. He carried her home anyway. For weeks, Lyriel drifted in and out of consciousness. Marcus cleaned her wounds with medicines he hoped would work. He fed her water and soup and mashed fruit. He sat beside her bed through the long nights and watched her breathe. Eli, his son, was 7 years old. He was not afraid of the strange alien woman in their spare room. He drew pictures for her and left them by her bed. He told her stories about his favorite games, even though she could not understand a word. Slowly, Lyriel healed. She woke one morning and found herself in a small wooden room filled with sunlight. A human child was sitting on a chair beside her, drawing something on a piece of paper. He looked up when she moved and smiled at her. She did not understand his words, but she understood his smile. Learning human language took months. Lyriel had no translator, no teacher, no books in her own tongue. She learned the way a child learns, by pointing at things and hearing their names. Marcus was patient with her. He repeated words again and again. He drew pictures when words failed. He never grew frustrated, never showed anger, never made her feel stupid. This confused her deeply. Among the Velkari, helping a stranger was a transaction. You gave help and expected something in return. Status, favors, political advantage. Nothing was free. Nothing was simple. But Marcus helped her because she needed help. That was all. When she tried to ask him what he wanted in return, he just looked confused. She learned that humans were like this. They gave gifts without expecting payment. They formed bonds with strangers who became friends, who became family. They loved easily and openly, and without calculation. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was completely unlike anything she had known. Months became years. Lyriel's wounds healed, but she did not leave. Where would she go? Her ship was destroyed. She had no way to contact her people. And truthfully, she did not want to leave. She had found something on this small, strange world that she had never found in the crystal palaces of her home. She found peace. Marcus taught her about plants and growing things. Eli taught her about games and laughter. She learned to cook human food, which was terrible, but the act of making it together was wonderful. She learned to walk in forests and swim in rivers and watch sunsets paint the sky in colors her world had never known. And somewhere along the way, she fell in love. It happened slowly, the way dawn creeps across the horizon. She noticed that her heart beat faster when Marcus smiled at her. She noticed that she looked for reasons to be near him. She noticed that his voice had become her favorite sound. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, Marcus reached over and took her hand. It was such a simple gesture. Humans did it all the time. But for Lyriel, it meant everything. Among her people, touch was formal and rare. You touched others only for specific purposes. But humans touched each other constantly. They hugged hello and goodbye. They held hands while walking. They put arms around shoulders and patted backs and ruffled hair. It was messy and intimate and beautiful. She held his hand and understood what it meant. I am here. You are not alone. We belong to each other. They married under the twin moons of New Meridian. The ceremony was small, just a few neighbors and friends. Lyriel wore flowers in what passed for her hair. Marcus wore his cleanest shirt. Eli stood beside them as witness. No one from her old life was there. No crystal thrones or ancient rituals. No politics or calculations. Just love. simple and true. A year later, their daughter was born. They named her Sarah. She was a miracle that science said should not exist. A hybrid child, with her mother's glowing eyes and her father's warm skin. She was perfect. 2 years after that, a son arrived. Marcus Jr., called MJ. He had his father's laugh and his mother's curiosity. He asked questions about everything and never stopped moving. She had lived in palaces and worn jewels and commanded servants. But nothing in her royal life had ever made her as happy as sitting on a simple porch with her husband beside her and her children playing in the yard. She knew her mother was out there somewhere, probably grieving. She knew she should try to send word. But years kept passing, and the life she was building felt more real than the life she had left behind. She was happy. For the first time in her long existence, she was truly happy. She chose not to go back. The merchant ship was not supposed to stop at New Meridian. It was a Velkari trading vessel on its way to more important worlds. But the engine broke down near the small human colony, and the captain had no choice. They landed for repairs and expected to leave within 2 days. One of the crew members, a young Velkari named Tessic, decided to explore the human settlement. He had never been to a human world before. He wanted to see these strange creatures up close. His captain warned him not to cause trouble. Humans were primitive and unpredictable. They might react badly to an alien in their midst. But the humans of New Meridian barely looked at Tessic twice. They nodded politely and went about their business. Some children stared at him with curiosity, but their parents gently pulled them away. No one screamed or ran or reached for weapons. He had expected more drama. He was walking through the market square, looking at strange human vegetables, when he saw something impossible. A Velkari woman was standing near a fruit stall. She was dressed in simple human clothes. Her carapace was dulled from years of planetary atmosphere. She looked older and softer than any Velkari he had seen before. But that was not the impossible thing. The impossible thing was the 2 children holding her hands. They were small, perhaps 10 and 8 human years old. Their skin was soft like human skin, but it had a faint shimmer to it. Their eyes were large and dark, and glowed slightly in the afternoon light. They had 4 arms each, folded neatly at their sides. They were clearly hybrid children, Velkari and human mixed together. Tessic's mind went blank. Such children should not exist. The 2 species were too different. Everyone knew that, and yet there they were, laughing at something their mother said. The woman looked up and saw Tessic staring. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, recognition perhaps, or fear. The woman gathered her children close and walked quickly away, disappearing into the crowd. Tessic stood frozen for a long time. Then he ran back to his ship. The message reached Amarith Prime 6 days later. It passed through secure channels, reserved for matters of imperial importance. It landed on the desk of the Queen's chief advisor. He read it 3 times before believing it. Then he walked very slowly to the throne room. Queen Thessera was reviewing tax reports when her advisor entered. She did not look up. Numbers and ledgers were boring, but they were necessary. An empire ran on money as much as power. The advisor bowed low. His voice shook slightly when he spoke. There had been a sighting, he said, on a human colony called New Meridian. A Velkari woman matching the description of Princess Lyriel. She was alive. She was well. She had 2 children. The tax reports fell from the Queen's hands. They scattered across the crystal floor like leaves. Human children, the advisor continued, or rather, hybrid children. The merchant crew member had seen them clearly. There was no mistake. The Queen sat very still. Her large, dark eyes stared at nothing. Her 6 hands gripped the arms of her throne until the crystal cracked beneath her fingers. 15 years, 15 years of grief and rage and empty hope. 15 years of believing her daughter was dead, and now this. Lyriel was alive. She had been alive all along. She had chosen to stay away. She had chosen humans over her own people. She had married one. She had borne his children. The emotions that flooded through Thesara were too many to name. Joy that her daughter lived. Rage that she had been abandoned. Confusion about what it all meant. And beneath everything else, a terrible hurt that cut deeper than any wound. Her daughter had not come home. Her daughter had not sent word. Her daughter had built a new life and left her mother to weep alone in the darkness. The advisor waited in terrified silence. He did not know what the queen would do. No one knew what the queen would do. She had become unpredictable in her grief. She might order the human colony burned. She might order celebrations throughout the empire. She might do both. Thesara finally spoke. Her voice was calm and cold. "Prepare my flagship," she said. "Clear my schedule for the next month. Tell no one where I am going." The advisor bowed and fled. Word spread through the palace despite his efforts. The court erupted into chaos. Factions formed within hours. Some demanded that the princess be brought home immediately, by force if the humans resisted. Others called Lyriel a traitor who had polluted the royal bloodline. They wanted her stripped of her title and forgotten. The military faction saw opportunity. If the princess had been held captive by humans for 15 years, that justified war. Never mind that she appeared to be living freely among them. Never mind the children. The humans had corrupted an imperial princess. They must be punished. The queen ignored them all. She boarded her flagship alone, except for her personal guards. She gave the coordinates and ordered silence on all communication channels. She was going to see her daughter. She was going to look into Lyriel's eyes and ask why. Far away on New Meridian, Lyriel watched the merchant ship depart and felt cold dread settle in her stomach. The young crew member had stared at her with such shock. He had seen the children. He had seen everything. That night, she told Marcus the truth. He knew she was alien royalty of some kind. He knew she had been lost and could not return home. But she had never told him all of it. The queen, the empire, the 15 years of assumed death. She told him now, and he listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and took her hand. His rough human fingers wrapped around her smooth ones. "If they come for you," he said, "we face them together. That is what family does." Lyriel wanted to argue. She wanted to explain the danger, the power of her mother, the vastness of the empire. But she looked at her husband's steady eyes and could not find the words. He was not afraid. After everything she had told him, he was not afraid. That was the moment she understood why she loved humans. Not because they were wise or powerful or ancient. They were none of those things. But they loved without conditions, and stood beside each other against any storm. They held hands in the darkness and refused to let go. Whatever was coming, she would not face it alone. Somewhere in the vast blackness between stars, a golden flagship burned toward New Meridian. The queen stood at its window and watched the stars streak past. She was coming for her daughter, and nothing in the galaxy would stop her. The golden ship came down through the clouds like a falling star. It was enormous. The people of New Meridian had never seen anything so large in their sky. They ran from their homes and stared upward with fear in their eyes. Some grabbed weapons, others grabbed children. No one knew what to do. The colonial governor sent urgent messages to Earth. Military commanders scrambled to activate defenses that were never meant to fight something like this. Politicians shouted at each other over communication channels. Panic spread through the settlement like fire through dry grass. But the ship did not attack. It simply landed in a field outside the colony and went silent. Hours passed. The humans waited. Nothing happened. No soldiers poured out. No weapons fired. The great golden vessel just sat there, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Then, a single figure emerged. Queen Thessera walked across the field alone. Her guards had wanted to accompany her. She had forbidden it. This was a family matter. It would be handled as such. She was tall and terrifying and beautiful. Her carapace shone like polished copper. Her robes flowed behind her like liquid shadow. She moved with the grace of a creature who had commanded empires before humans had learned to write. The humans parted before her like water before a stone. They stared at her with wide eyes. Some bowed without knowing why. There was something about her that demanded respect, something ancient and powerful that touched a deep part of the human mind. She did not look at them. Her eyes were fixed on a small house at the edge of the settlement. She could feel her daughter's presence there, like warmth from a distant fire. Lyriel stood in the doorway of her home. She had watched the ship descend. She had recognized it immediately. Her mother's personal vessel, her mother's colors, her mother's style. 15 years since she had seen that ship. 15 years since she had seen her mother. Marcus stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. Sarah and MJ were behind them, peering out with curious eyes. They had never seen another Velkari before. They did not know that the magnificent creature walking toward them was their grandmother. The queen stopped 10 meters from the house. She looked at her daughter. Lyriel looked back. No one moved. No one breathed. The moment stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Then Sarah tugged at her mother's hand. "Who is that?" she asked in her small voice. "She is very pretty." Something cracked in the queen's ancient face. A tiny fracture in the perfect mask she had worn for centuries. Her dark eyes moved to the child, to her grandchild, this small impossible creature with human skin and Velkari eyes. Lyriel stepped forward. She bowed her head slightly in the old formal greeting. "Mother, I should have sent word." The queen's voice was cold as space. "Yes, you should have." She looked at Marcus then, at the human man who had stolen her daughter. He was not what she expected. He was not handsome by any standard she understood. He was weathered and simple and utterly unremarkable. But he did not look away from her gaze. He met her ancient eyes with steady courage. This primitive creature with his short lifespan and his fragile body stood before the eternal queen and did not flinch. Something stirred in Thessera's chest, something very close to respect. "Will you come inside?" Lyriel asked. "We have much to discuss." The queen entered the small human house. She had to bend slightly to fit through the door. Inside it was warm and cluttered and filled with the smell of cooked food. Human paintings hung on the walls. Human furniture filled the rooms. Nothing was made of crystal or precious metals. Everything was wood and cloth and simple things. She sat in a chair that creaked beneath her weight. Marcus brought her water in a clay cup. She held it in her 6 hands and looked at her daughter. The conversation lasted hours. Lyriel explained everything. The attack, the crash, Marcus saving her life, the years of healing and learning and falling in love. She spoke of human kindness that expected nothing in return. She spoke of holding hands with her children as they walked through forests. She spoke of laughter and simple meals and watching sunsets with her family. The queen listened in silence. Her face showed nothing. She asked hard questions. "Why did you not contact me? Did you not think of what I suffered? Did you not care about your duty, your title, your people?" Lyriel answered each one honestly. She had been afraid at first, afraid her mother would force her home, afraid of what the Empire would think of her human family. afraid of losing the peace she had found. And then the years passed, and it became easier to stay silent. Easier to pretend her old life did not exist. Easier to just be a wife and mother instead of a princess. The queen should have been angry. Part of her was angry, but a larger part was simply tired. Tired of grief, tired of rage, tired of the cold weight she had carried for 15 years. She looked at her grandchildren. Sarah was telling MJ to sit still. MJ was poking his sister with one of his forearms. They bickered like any siblings. They glanced at their strange grandmother with curiosity rather than fear. Lyriel had taught them that family was never something to fear. Even alien family. Even queens. Marcus spoke then. He apologized for keeping the queen's daughter from her. He explained that he had not known who Lyriel truly was for many years. By the time he learned, they had already built a life together. I would die for her. I would die for our children. That is all I can offer. I know it is not much in your eyes. The queen studied him for a long moment. It is more than most in my court would offer, she said finally. They love power and position. You love my daughter. That is a rare thing. She stayed for 3 days. She ate human food and tried not to show her distaste. She watched human children play and tried to understand their chaotic games. She let Sarah and MJ show her their favorite places. The waterfall that sparkled in the morning light, the meadow filled with glowing flowers, the library where their father worked with his plants and books. She began to understand. Humans were not the primitive savages her advisors had described. They were different, yes, strange and loud and messy, but there was something beautiful in their chaos, something genuine in their emotions. They did not hide behind masks and politics. They said what they meant, and loved what they loved, and held hands with each other without shame. Her daughter had found something precious here, something the Velkari had forgotten long ago. The simple joy of belonging to someone. On the third night, the queen sat on the porch with Lyriel. The twin moons hung low in the sky. Insects sang in the darkness. Inside the house, Marcus was putting the children to bed. Come home, Thisara said quietly. Take your rightful place as heir. Bring your family. I will make the court accept them. Lyriel shook her head. My home is here now, mother. My children are human as much as Velkari. They belong to this world. The queen was silent for a long time. Then what would you have me do? She asked. Pretend this never happened? Return to my empty throne and grieve alone? No, Lyriel said. She took her mother's hand. Let this be a beginning. Let our people see what humans truly are. Let my children be a bridge between our worlds. The queen looked down at their joined hands. Such a human gesture. Simple and intimate and full of meaning. Perhaps it was time for things to change. The queen's flagship rose through the clouds of New Meridian and turned toward home. Thisara stood alone at the observation window and watched the small blue-green world shrink behind her. Her daughter was down there. Her grandchildren. Her daughter's human husband. She was leaving them behind, but she was not leaving empty-handed. The journey back to Amarith Prime took 12 days, 12 days of silence and thinking and planning. The queen had ruled for 3,000 years. She had survived wars and rebellions and assassinations. She knew how to bend the will of others. She knew how to make the impossible seem inevitable. When her ship landed at the capital, the court was waiting. They had heard rumors. They wanted answers. They wanted blood or celebration. They wanted something dramatic. The queen gave them nothing. She walked through the crystal halls without speaking. She entered her private chambers and sealed the doors. For 3 days, she spoke to no one. The court went mad with speculation. The princess was dead after all. The princess was being brought home in chains. The princess had been tortured by humans. The humans had sent an army. War had begun. Peace had been signed. Everything was fine. Everything was terrible. On the fourth day, the Queen summoned the full assembly. Every noble, every advisor, every military commander gathered in the great throne room. Thousands of Valkyrie filled the space, their carapaces gleaming in the crystal light. They fell silent when the Queen appeared. Thesara climbed to her throne and looked out over her people. She saw fear and greed and curiosity in their ancient faces. She saw factions ready to fight each other. She saw an empire on the edge of a blade. She began to speak. "My daughter lives," she said. Her voice carried to every corner of the vast room. She was not taken by humans. She was attacked by Kethra raiders and left for dead. A human man found her and saved her life. She chose to stay with him. She chose love over duty. The court erupted. Voices shouted over each other. Some demanded punishment for the princess. Others demanded war against the Kethra. Others still accused the Queen of lying. Thesara raised one hand. Silence fell instantly. "I have met this human man," she continued. "I have seen the life my daughter built. I have held my grandchildren in my arms. They are hybrid children, Valkyrie and human blood mixed together. They should not exist, and yet they do." Gasps rippled through the assembly. Hybrid children. The words were almost too strange to understand. "For 15 years, the Queen said, I believed my daughter was dead. I let my grief harden into hatred. I listened to voices that told me humans were savages and monsters. I almost started a war, based on lies and assumptions." Her dark eyes swept across the crowd. I was wrong. The silence was absolute. No one had ever heard the Eternal Queen admit to being wrong. About anything. "Humans are not like us," Thesara continued. "They live short lives. They feel everything deeply. They love without calculation and help without expectation. My daughter learned this when a human stranger carried her from a burning ship and healed her wounds and asked nothing in return. She stood from her throne. Her robes flowed around her like liquid shadow. I went to that world expecting to find my daughter held captive by primitive creatures. Instead, I found her holding hands with her children. Do you understand what that means? They hold hands. They touch each other constantly. They embrace in greeting and in farewell. They show affection openly and without shame. Her voice dropped lower. We have forgotten how to do that. We have become so careful, so political, so afraid of weakness that we have lost the simple joy of connection. My daughter remembered it because a human taught her. The military faction started to protest. The humans were still dangerous, they argued. Their short lives made them reckless. Their emotions made them unpredictable. Peace with such creatures was impossible. The Queen silenced them with a look. I am not asking for your opinions, she said coldly. I am telling you what will happen. There will be no war with the humans. There will be trade agreements and cultural exchanges. There will be a formal alliance between our peoples. She raised her voice so it rang against the crystal walls. My grandchildren will serve as ambassadors between our worlds. They are proof that Valkyrie and humans can build something together. They are the bridge to our future. The court argued for weeks afterward. The hardliners never stopped fighting. But the Queen was still the Queen, and her word was still law. Slowly, grudgingly, the Empire began to change. Trade ships traveled to human space. Human diplomats visited Amarith Prime. Scientists studied the hybrid children with wonder and confusion. Artists created works inspired by human culture. Young Valkyrie began to adopt human customs, including the strange practice of holding hands. Years passed. Sarah and MJ grew up on New Meridian, raised by their human father and Valkyrie mother. They learned both languages, they studied both histories, they understood both peoples in ways that no one else could. When they came of age, they traveled to Amarith Prime as official ambassadors of the Human Valkyrie Alliance. They walked through the crystal halls that their mother had known as a child. They met their grandmother in the great throne room. The queen descended from her throne to greet them. She did not bow or offer formal gestures. Instead, she did something that shocked the entire court. She took their hands. Sarah on one side, MJ on the other. The eternal queen stood between her grandchildren and held their hands like any human grandmother might. "This is what we have learned," she announced to the assembly. "This is what humans taught us. Connection is not weakness. Love is not foolishness. Family is not only blood and duty. Family is a choice we make every day." She looked down at her grandchildren, and for the first time in 3,000 years, Queen Thesara smiled in public. The news spread across both empires. The image of the queen holding hands with her hybrid grandchildren appeared on every news feed and communication channel. Humans saw it and felt hope. Velkari saw it and began to question their old assumptions. Change did not happen overnight. There were still conflicts and misunderstandings. There were still those who hated and feared. But the bridge had been built. The connection had been made. Two peoples who had nearly gone to war were learning to hold hands instead. And far away on New Meridian, Lirio and Marcus sat on their porch and watched the stars come out. They were older now. Gray had crept into Marcus's hair. Lines had formed around Lirio's eyes. They had lived through history without meaning to. But tonight was just another night. The air was cool, the insects sang, the twin moons rose over the mountains. Marcus reached over and took his wife's hand. She leaned against his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Staying here instead of going home?" Lirio thought about it. She thought about crystal thrones and endless politics. She thought about power and duty and ancient traditions. She thought about what her life might have been. Then she thought about this porch, this man, this simple wooden house where she had raised her children and grown old with her husband. "No," she said, "I found my home. I found you." They sat together in comfortable silence, two people from different worlds, holding hands as the night grew deep. Somewhere in the vastness of space, empires rose and fell, wars were fought, and treaties signed. History marched forward in all its chaos and glory. But here, on this small world, there was only love, simple and true, as it had always been, as it would always be. The stars wheeled overhead, and Liriel closed her eyes. She was home.